Good evening, y'all. Welcome back to my channel, The Chasing Christian. I'm skipping my typical intro because I've been having a lot of connectivity issues and I've been trying to get a video going for a while. I'm just going to come on here pretty short and sweet and share that I was in First Chronicles 17 and 18, and I learned something that I just wanted to point out. It talked about how David had in his heart that he looked around his beautiful house and he was like, well, I only have the Ark of the Covenant, God, technically the presence of God, tangible in a tent. And he's like, God, I want to build you a beautiful house. And God was like, wow, yeah, well, I guess he wasn't like wow because he was surprised, but I think God loved where his heart was at. And so he Oh, this is tough, y'all. The connection is, I don't know what's going on with my Wi-Fi lately. It's been cutting in and out in my home and everything. Long story short, David wants to build God a home. God says, no, but I will establish your home. A name for your seed shall have an everlasting kingdom forever. And so there were immediate implications of Solomon building the house of God, but there was also, the eternal forever kingdom, the eternal kingdom that we know is meant to connote with the Messiah, Jesus. And so when he did that, one thing that stood out to me was, how grateful that David was. And he was just like, who am I, O Lord? And what is my house that you have brought me this far? And then skipping ahead, he's giving praise to God. And he just said, now, Lord, you are God and have promised this goodness to your servant. Now you have been pleased to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue before you forever. For you have blessed it, O God, it shall be blessed forever. And so, one, stepping out of faith and knowing that whatever God says shall be. And then, in addition to that, I read a commentary that says something about, everything about our relationship with God is and all the things he gives us, all the merit he may give us is about who he is and his character and the amazing God that we serve, his heart for us. And it has nothing to do with any merit we can have on earth or anything we can earn, because David could see that and was like, oh, well, God's gonna, extend my family's throne forever. And build a house in my name, and could have acted in a place of pride and be puffed up and like, oh, well, this is about me and where I am at status wise. But there was a level of humility and understanding that it is only by God being that great and God being that generous do these things have weight. They're not anything that we could use to puff our own self up. And another key thing, very small, that I really appreciated is that in in chapter 18, verse 8, it says, David brought a large amount of bronze with which Solomon made the bronze sea, the pillars, and the articles of bronze. And now this is for the eventual house of God. And so it made me think about how God had spoken a prophecy to David. David responded in faith, gratitude, and thanksgiving. And then David, almost as a faith activation, went out and purchased the material, or at least some of it, purchased material, especially when he was on a kingdom high. You see in 19 and 20, like constantly that God has had a hand on David. What is the exact words? The Lord preserved David wherever he went. He had victory. He was, pillaging his enemies. They were becoming his servants. And so he was on this high of reaping a great reward the spoils of war. And so he took that kingdom high moment in which God was delivering his enemies into his hands, and everything that he got, it says, he got articles of gold and silver and bronze, and he dedicated those. All right, we're wrapping up. We're wrapping up because this might cut out again. But he activated his faith by knowing that he wasn't going to build the house of God, which would have was definitely could have been a very tough thing to hear. But knowing and trusting that it will be his child that will do it, he trusted the future of his children in God's hands. He trusted the heart of his child to do it, and he trusted that his child would obey. And so he prepared. He got the bronze and set it aside and stored it for Solomon to use. And so a small example, again, I'm going to keep this short because I don't want the video to cut out again, but that's like when the Lord had prophesied to me about, I will be, my first child would come at a certain time and I will be having a boy. And so my first act of faith was, I remember I went to the store, bought prenatals, and I was like, okay, Lord, I believe you, because he told me it was going to happen at a certain time. And I found that I was pregnant the exact day the Lord told me that I was. And so I remember praying when I went to the checkout for the prenatals, and I was like, Lord, I'm trusting you. And, this is an activation of faith. And also, then I went out and bought a pair of blue socks, and I was like, Lord, I'm trusting you again that this is my son and this is my activation of faith. And so I even know a friend who I've spoken about her before, but the doctor said she was infertile. There was an issue she had in her brain where she couldn't even have her menstrual cycle. She said the Lord showed her dreams of having a child and having her menstrual cycle. And so, we prayed over her, and I even remember feeling like the heat from her womb when we prayed. And she gave birth to her son a couple of months ago. And so a beautiful thing about that also is her and her husband operated in faith. They built a whole nursery before she was even pregnant. They were trying and trying, but they built a whole nursery in faith. Like put the crib in there when there was not even a sign or an idea of a baby in her belly or in her uterus. But and God is faithful. And so I guess I just want to leave you with that, is that an activation of faith, of believing God with what he says, and then partnering with him in a way, as we're waiting, what can we do? And so those are small things, and you could share in the comments like a way that maybe you have activated your faith when God has spoken a word, because David never got to see this come to fruition. So he had to die on trusting in God to fulfill his prophecy. Abraham had to die trusting God to fulfill his prophecy. Imagine how he would have felt to know that the kingdom of Israel was numerous and was based off of the covenant that God set with him. And, I waited on the prophecy to be fulfilled for about 2 years. Some people wait longer for a word spoken from the Lord. So I just wanted to share that. I don't know if the video is going to cut out, but yes, I just think it's a beautiful one small sentence. David got the bronze and stored it up, and that was the bronze that his son had used to build the house of the Lord. And so, him just really, because he could have just kept. Oh, yo, pray for my internet. Pray for my internet. Wrapping up, he could have just went about his life and be like, oh, well, I guess my son will worry about it then. But he, decided to show an act of faith, leaving something behind for his child, because he believed in the legacy that God was building. And so I leave that for us, and me too. I think I'm going to spend a little bit more time, especially as I'm navigating some difficult things in some relationships, trusting God. And then, what can be an act of faith? How can we partner with the word that God has spoken over our lives? What is something that we could do to move towards faith in the thing that he is promising us? And so I'll leave you with that. Hopefully it doesn't cut out anymore, but Lord willing, I'll be back tomorrow to see you for another video. Bye-bye.